After saving the starving Apache POW woman, the cowboy said, "You're under my protection now." The sun was just beginning to sink behind the distant hills, casting long shadows over the rugged plains. The air was dry and heavy, carrying the faint smell of dust and sagebrush. On this vast and lonely stretch of land, a lone cowboy rode slowly, his horse's hooves kicking up small clouds of dust with each careful step. He had been traveling for hours, following the winding paths and trails that only someone who knew the land well could navigate. His weathered hat shaded his eyes, but the orange glow of the sunset reflected off the brim, highlighting the determination etched into his face. He was used to the silence of the plains. The quiet could be both comforting and unsettling. Out here, far from the towns and settlements, a man had to rely on his senses and his instincts to survive. And today, something about the air felt different. There was a tension, a kind of quiet that wasn't normal. He slowed his horse to a cautious walk, scanning the landscape. His eyes caught something unusual in the distance, a small, broken fence leaning at an awkward angle. The wooden posts were splintered and some had fallen completely. There were footprints around it, fresh footprints. The cowboy's heart tightened. The footprints didn't look like those of wild animals. He dismounted, tying his horse to a nearby tree and crouched low to examine the trail. The prints were deep, as if someone heavy had been struggling through the dirt. Some tracks led to a small, abandoned cabin, its roof partially collapsed, the walls blackened by old fires. He could see broken boards, shattered glass, and signs of a struggle. His instincts screamed that someone had been here recently and not by choice. He moved cautiously, every step measured. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying with it faint, almost inaudible sounds. A soft whimper reached his ears, so faint he could have imagined it, but he hadn't. The sound came again, more distinct this time, the weak, desperate breathing of someone who was very sick or very frightened. The cowboy's pulse quickened, but not from fear. From experience, he knew that this sound meant someone needed help, and help wouldn't wait. He approached the cabin slowly, making sure to stay out of view as much as possible. The doorway was dark, and inside he could barely make out the figure of a person curled up on the dirt floor. She was small, hunched over, and her clothes were torn and covered in dust. Her skin was pale and her cheeks sunken, showing the marks of hunger and exhaustion. When he called out softly, "Hey there, are you hurt?" she flinched violently, pulling her thin arms around her knees. Her dark eyes, wide with fear, stared at him as if he were both a threat and a ghost. She was trembling so badly that it was hard to tell if it was from the cold, the hunger, or pure terror. The cowboy lowered himself to the ground, keeping his voice calm and steady. "I'm not here to hurt you, I'm just trying to help." It took a long moment before she responded. She didn't speak at first, only staring at him with a mixture of fear and suspicion. Finally, in a voice so soft it was barely audible, she said, I can't go back." The words were broken, almost whispered, but they carried a weight that made his heart tighten. He knew then that she had been through something terrible, something that left her too afraid to return anywhere she had known. He gently placed a canteen of water on the ground near her and spoke again. "Drink." "You're safe for now?" She hesitated, looking at the water as if it were both a blessing and a trap. Slowly, carefully, she reached for it, her fingers shaking. She took a small sip, then another, until the canteen was half empty. The relief in her eyes was subtle but unmistakable. She was still cautious, still scared, but she had accepted a small measure of help. The cowboy knew he couldn't leave her here. Out on the plains, with night approaching, danger was everywhere. Wild animals prowled the darkness, and humans with ill intentions could be even more dangerous. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a blanket, draping it over her thin shoulders. It was worn and rough, but it would help keep her warm. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said. "Someplace you can rest and eat. Will you trust me to help you?" Her eyes widened, and for a long moment she didn't answer. Fear warred with exhaustion and the faint spark of hope he had just given her. Finally, with a small nod, she whispered, I think so." It was the first time she had spoken willingly since he found her, and it was enough. He helped her to her feet, steadying her as best he could. Her legs were weak, trembling under her weight, and he could feel the tension in her body. He didn't rush her, didn't push her. Instead, he let her lean on him, guiding her slowly toward his horse. He lifted her onto the saddle carefully, making sure she was secure before climbing up himself. The horse shifted nervously, sensing her fear, but the cowboy whispered softly, calming both animal and passenger. As they rode away from the ruined cabin, the sky darkened, painted with streaks of red and purple. The wind was cooler now, and the plains stretched endlessly before them. The cowboy kept one hand on the reins and the other subtly near his weapon, ready for any threat that might appear. He didn't know who might be looking for her or what had led to her captivity, but he knew one thing: she was under his protection now. Hours passed as they rode, the silence broken only by the sound of the horse's hooves and the occasional cough or murmur from the woman. She was still wary, still uncertain, but she gradually relaxed, leaning slightly against him. It was a small gesture, but it showed the first sign of trust. The cowboy allowed himself a quiet sigh of relief. Trust, once earned, could be powerful, and he was willing to give her all the time she needed to feel safe. As night fully settled over the plains, they stopped near a shallow creek where the horse could drink and rest. The cowboy built a small fire, careful to keep it low so as not to draw attention. He offered her some of the bread and dried meat he had carried, and she took it hesitantly at first, then with more urgency. It was obvious she had not eaten properly for days, and the way she devoured the food made his chest tighten. No one deserved to be treated that way, he thought, and he silently vowed to protect her with everything he had. Sitting across the small fire from her, he finally spoke about the world outside the plains, in gentle, measured words. He didn't push questions about her past, didn't demand answers. He only offered stories of the land, the animals, and the small acts of kindness he had witnessed in his life. Slowly, she began to respond, her voice weak but steady. For the first time in a long while, she felt heard. She felt like she mattered. The night was long, and the air grew colder. The cowboy wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders and kept watch, listening for any sounds that might indicate danger. Every rustle of the grass, every distant howl made him alert, but he never let fear show. He wanted her to feel safe, even if the world outside was unpredictable and cruel. By the time the first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon, the woman had drifted into a fitful sleep. Her breathing had evened out, and the tension in her body had eased slightly. The cowboy watched her for a long time, thinking about the path that had led them both here. He knew this was only the beginning, the start of a journey that would be difficult, full of challenges and dangers. But he also knew that he could not turn back now. She had been found in her moment of greatest need, and he had made a promise, unspoken but absolute, to protect her. As the sun rose, casting golden light over the plains, the cowboy prepared for the journey ahead. He carefully packed his supplies, checked the horse, and gently nudged the woman awake. "Time to move," he said softly. She opened her eyes, tired but alert, and nodded. Though fear still lingered in her gaze, there was also a faint spark of hope, the first real hope she had felt in a long time. He helped her onto the horse once again, adjusting the blanket and making sure she was secure. Then, with one hand on the reins and the other ready for anything, he led the way across the plains. Every mile they covered brought them farther from the ruins of the cabin and the horrors she had endured. Every step was a step toward safety, toward freedom, toward a chance at a new beginning. And though the cowboy didn't yet know all the dangers that lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain: she was under his protection now. And he would not let anything harm her as long as he lived. The plains stretched endlessly before them, the rising sun painting the world in shades of gold and orange. A new day had begun, and with it, the promise of survival, trust, and the fragile beginnings of hope. The morning air was crisp as the cowboy and the young Apache woman moved quietly across the rolling plains. The sun had risen fully now, casting its golden light over the grasses and distant hills. Every shadow seemed alive, and the cowboy's eyes constantly scanned the horizon. He had learned long ago that danger often traveled quietly, hiding in the most unexpected places. The woman sat stiffly on the horse, still wary but holding onto a fragile thread of trust. She kept her gaze on the ground, careful not to draw attention, and every now and then she glanced at him with a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. The cowboy noticed the way her hands trembled slightly, even as she tried to steady herself. Hunger and fear had left their mark, but she was learning that small gestures of care could help her survive. They rode in silence for a while, letting the rhythmic sound of the horse's hooves soothe the tension. The cowboy had brought her far enough from the ruined cabin to be safe for the moment, but he knew they could not linger. Someone, or perhaps many people, had wanted to capture her. Out here, the land offered little cover, and tracking was easy for anyone who knew the terrain. He had to think ahead to anticipate threats before they appeared. As they moved along a narrow trail that wound through a small grove of trees, the woman finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. Why are you helping me?" she asked. The question hung in the air like a fragile thread. The cowboy didn't answer immediately. He looked ahead, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied the path. Then he turned slightly, his voice calm and steady. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "No one deserves to be left to suffer alone, and right now you're not alone." She looked down at her hands, tightly gripping the horse's mane. "People, they don't usually care," she said quietly. "Not after what happened to me." Her words carried a pain that cut through the cowboy's heart. He could see the fear and distrust still lingering behind her eyes. He understood why. He had seen cruelty and injustice in the world too many times to forget it. The trail led them to a small, shaded stream where the horse could drink and rest for a few minutes. The woman dismounted with a careful, almost tentative movement. Her legs were weak from days without proper food or rest, and she nearly stumbled, but the cowboy was there instantly, steadying her. "Take your time," he said. "There's no rush. We'll move when you're ready." She nodded silently, kneeling to cup water in her hands and bring it to her lips. The cool water was a relief, washing away some of the dryness that had plagued her for days. The cowboy watched her quietly, noticing every small detail, the way she flinched at sudden sounds, the careful way she kept her back straight, the flicker of hope in her eyes as she drank. He knew she was fragile, but he also saw strength buried deep beneath her exhaustion. After a few minutes, they continued their journey. The plains stretched endlessly, and the cowboy guided her carefully along hidden trails, avoiding well-traveled paths that could lead them into danger. He kept a hand near his weapon, his senses alert for any sign of pursuit. Though the sun shone brightly, he knew that shadows could hide threats, and that danger often came quietly without warning. As they rode, the woman began to ask questions, small and tentative at first. She wanted to know his name, where they were headed, and why he had chosen to help her. He answered cautiously, careful not to reveal too much but offering enough to build trust. He told her about the land, the animals, and the small joys of life on the plains. He spoke of the quiet satisfaction of surviving the wilderness, and of the responsibility he felt toward those who could not protect themselves. The woman listened, her voice growing stronger with each question. She told him bits of her story, carefully choosing words and avoiding details that made her shiver with fear. She spoke of being taken from her home, of the long days of hunger and exhaustion, and of the constant fear that someone would find her. Her story was painful, but the cowboy listened without judgment, offering only quiet reassurance. Every time she spoke, he could see the tension in her shoulders ease just a little. The day passed slowly, with the sun climbing higher and the temperature rising. They rested occasionally in the shade of trees or behind large rocks, giving the horse a chance to graze and the woman a chance to stretch her legs. She was beginning to rely on him more, though her movements were still cautious, her trust tentative. The cowboy was patient, understanding that trust could not be rushed. It had to be earned, and he was willing to give her all the time she needed. As evening approached, the cowboy noticed subtle signs that they were being watched. A faint trail of disturbed grass, a distant shape that moved just beyond the trees, nothing definite, but enough to keep him alert. He slowed the horse and guided the woman into a narrow ravine, using the natural cover to hide their presence. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "And don't make sudden movements." She nodded, her eyes wide but steady, trusting his instincts. They crouched behind a large boulder, waiting and watching as the faint shapes passed in the distance. The cowboy's heart pounded, but he remained calm on the surface. He had faced threats before, and he knew that panic could be dangerous. The woman's hands trembled slightly as she held onto the horse, but she didn't speak, sensing that silence was their ally. Eventually, the shapes moved on, and the cowboy signaled that it was safe to continue. Night fell slowly over the plains, and they made camp near a small, hidden grove. The cowboy built a low fire, careful to keep the flames small and controlled. The woman watched quietly, her eyes reflecting the flickering light. She ate sparingly at first, her body still weak and unsure of when the next meal would come. The cowboy ate with her, offering words of encouragement and sharing stories of his travels and encounters with the land. Around the fire, they began to talk more openly. The woman asked about the cowboy's life, and he told her only what was necessary, enough to build trust but not enough to create vulnerability. He explained the ways of the plains, the dangers that lurked in the shadows, and the importance of staying alert and resourceful. She listened intently, absorbing every word, realizing that her survival now depended not only on her own strength, but also on her ability to trust him. As the night deepened, the woman spoke more about her fears. She admitted that she had been alone for so long that she had forgotten what it meant to be cared for. The cowboy listened patiently, offering quiet comfort without pressure. He understood that fear could linger long after danger had passed, and he wanted her to feel safe in his presence. Slowly, she began to relax, leaning slightly toward him as the fire's warmth spread. The cowboy kept watch through the night, his eyes scanning the dark horizon, listening for any sounds that might indicate danger. Every rustle of grass, every distant animal cry made him alert, but he remained calm, knowing that his steady presence was helping the woman feel safe. For the first time in days, she slept more soundly, her breathing even and her body at rest. By dawn, the woman was stronger, though still cautious. She ate more heartily, her body beginning to recover from the long period of hunger. The cowboy watched her with quiet satisfaction, knowing that this was only the beginning of their journey. There would be more challenges ahead, more dangers to face, but she had survived the first day, and she had survived because she had trusted him. They set out again, moving carefully through the plains. The cowboy chose paths that offered natural cover and avoided well-traveled roads. He kept one hand near his weapon, alert for any sign of pursuit. The woman rode with a steadier posture now, her confidence growing with every mile. She began to notice the small details of the land, the way the wind shifted, the tracks of animals, and the hidden trails that could provide safety. During the journey, the woman's questions became more frequent and confident. She asked about the animals, the plants, and the ways of the plains. The cowboy answered patiently, teaching her not just how to survive, but how to navigate the world with awareness and caution. He shared the wisdom he had gained from years of living on the land, from facing dangers and making decisions that could mean life or death. By late afternoon, they reached a small ridge overlooking a wide valley. The view was breathtaking, the golden light of the setting sun casting long shadows and highlighting the natural beauty of the plains. The woman paused, taking in the sight, and for a moment she allowed herself to forget the fear and pain she had endured. The cowboy watched her quietly, understanding that moments like this could help heal wounds that words alone could not touch. They camped in a hidden grove for the night, the cowboy building another low fire. This time the woman helped, gathering small branches and twigs, her hands more steady and confident. She cooked a small meal over the flames, sharing it with the cowboy. They spoke more openly now, sharing thoughts and feelings, building a bond that was founded on trust, care, and shared experience. The night was quiet, the stars bright above them. The woman finally allowed herself to speak about her dreams, about the life she had hoped for before captivity had taken everything from her. The cowboy listened, offering encouragement and reassurance. He told her that survival was the first step, but reclaiming her life was the next. He promised that he would help her every step of the way. As they settled down for sleep, the woman felt a small sense of hope, a feeling she had not known in a long time. She was still cautious, still aware of the dangers that lay ahead, but she was no longer alone. The cowboy had proven that he would protect her, guide her, and help her survive. For the first time in many days, she felt the faint beginnings of trust. The cowboy kept watch again, his eyes scanning the horizon, alert for any signs of trouble. He knew the journey would be long and difficult, but he also knew that together they could face whatever came next. The plains were vast, and danger was always near, but so was hope. And for the first time in a long time, the woman allowed herself to believe that she could survive, that she could live, and that she could trust someone again. The sun had just begun to climb over the horizon, painting the plains in soft shades of gold and orange. The cowboy and the Apache woman were moving cautiously, the silence of the early morning wrapping around them like a blanket. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of earth and grass, but the calmness was deceptive. Danger was near. The cowboy knew it. He had learned over the years that threats could appear suddenly, often when least expected. They had traveled for days, moving slowly through hidden trails and using every advantage the land could provide. The woman had grown stronger, her steps more steady, her trust in the cowboy deeper. Yet there was still fear in her eyes, the fear of being hunted, of being captured, of losing the fragile safety she had finally found. The cowboy could see it, and he understood. He did not push her. He knew that fear could not be rushed away. It could only be faced slowly, step by step. As they approached a small ridge overlooking a narrow valley, the cowboy paused. He signaled for the woman to stop as he scanned the horizon. There at the edge of the distant trees, he saw movement, a subtle ripple that betrayed human presence. His hand tightened on the reins. The tracks they had been careful to avoid had been followed. Someone was watching them. He whispered, "We're being followed. Stay calm and don't make sudden movements." The woman's body stiffened, but she nodded, trusting his judgment. They dismounted quietly, moving into the cover of the brush and rocks that dotted the ridge. The cowboy knew the terrain well, using it to their advantage. He guided her behind a large boulder, low enough to hide them from view but high enough to see what was coming. Through the gaps in the trees, he could make out figures moving closer, men armed, searching, their eyes sharp. The cowboy's heart did not race, but his mind worked quickly. He knew that confrontation was inevitable, but he also knew that careful planning could make the difference between survival and capture. He adjusted his position, keeping the woman close and hidden, whispering instructions in a calm, steady voice. "Stay behind me. Watch my movements. Don't speak unless I tell you," he said. She nodded, her hands gripping his arm slightly, a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. The men drew closer, voices low, but their intentions clear. They were not casual travelers. They were determined, trained to find their target. The cowboy recognized the danger immediately. He could see the weight of their weapons, the way their eyes searched the ground, the way their movements were precise and methodical. Every instinct in him screamed that they needed to act carefully. He waited until the men were within range, then moved quietly, leading the woman along a hidden path that would give them a tactical advantage. The terrain worked in their favor, rocks and trees provided cover, and the slope of the hill gave them a higher position. The cowboy signaled for her to crouch low, keeping her body behind the rocks. She obeyed, her trust evident in the careful way she followed his lead. The standoff began. The men paused, looking around, sensing movement but unable to pinpoint their target. The cowboy's eyes met theirs for a brief moment, steady and unwavering. He knew that intimidation alone could buy them a few moments, but action was inevitable. He whispered to the woman, "Stay calm. We can do this together." The first man moved slightly, trying to flank them. The cowboy acted quickly, using a mix of skill and strategy to block the path without revealing their exact location. The woman, seeing his confidence and calmness, began to feel a small spark of courage within herself. She had been through so much, and yet here she was, standing with someone who had proven he would protect her. A shot rang out, distant but enough to make them both flinch. The cowboy kept his voice steady. "Move." Now he led her along a narrow, hidden path that wound through the rocks, using every ounce of his knowledge of the land to stay one step ahead. The men shouted, realizing they were being evaded, but the cowboy had the advantage of surprise and knowledge of the terrain. As they moved, the woman began to act instinctively, helping in small ways. She spotted a loose branch that could be used to create a distraction and whispered its placement to him. Together, they created a minor obstacle that slowed their pursuers, giving them precious seconds to escape. The cowboy glanced at her, pride mixed with relief in his eyes. She was no longer just surviving. She was participating, showing bravery he had not expected so soon. Hours passed as they navigated the rugged terrain. The sun climbed higher, and the air grew warmer, but neither slowed their careful movement. Every shadow could hide danger, every sound could be a warning. The cowboy moved with the precision of someone who had faced danger countless times, and the woman followed, her confidence growing. She no longer clung to fear alone. She clung to the knowledge that together they could face whatever came. By late afternoon, they reached a small, secluded ranch that seemed abandoned. The cowboy's instincts told him it was safe for the moment, but he remained alert, checking every corner, every shadow. The woman watched quietly, sensing the tension in his body, understanding that safety was temporary and vigilance was constant. Inside the ranch, they found a small room with enough space to rest and hide. The cowboy allowed her to sit while he prepared a simple meal. She ate cautiously at first, still wary, but hunger overtook fear, and soon she was eating with more confidence. He watched her carefully, making sure she understood that the food was safe, that this moment was theirs alone. As they rested, the woman began to open up more. She spoke about her fears, the long days of captivity, and the moments she thought she would never escape. The cowboy listened, offering quiet reassurance, never interrupting, never judging. He understood that her story was not just about the past, it was about the strength she had shown to survive. But the danger had not vanished. The cowboy knew their pursuers were likely close, and he had to plan their next move carefully. He spoke softly, outlining the path they would take once night fell, using the cover of darkness to their advantage. The woman listened, absorbing his instructions, her trust in him evident in the way she nodded and followed each step without hesitation. As evening approached, the first signs of movement appeared outside. The cowboy and the woman crouched quietly, listening to the distant voices. The men had not given up. They had followed their target relentlessly, but the cowboys' careful planning had kept them out of immediate danger. Now it was a matter of strategy, patience, and courage. The cowboy whispered, "We need to act, be ready, but stay calm." "Trust me?" The woman's hands trembled slightly, but she didn't speak, waiting for his signal. He took a deep breath, assessing the situation. He could see that the men were close enough that a direct confrontation might be unavoidable, but he had prepared for this. He had studied the land, understood the paths, and now it was time to use every advantage they had. The first man stepped too close, and the cowboy acted. He moved swiftly, using a combination of skill and instinct to create a diversion. The woman, following his lead, used her knowledge of the small obstacles around them to slow their pursuers. Together they worked seamlessly, a team forged by necessity and trust. The standoff escalated, but the cowboy remained calm. He spoke only when necessary, giving clear, concise instructions to the woman. She followed without hesitation, her fear still present but now accompanied by determination. The men, frustrated and unable to anticipate their movements, began to falter. Hours of careful maneuvering passed, and eventually the pursuers were forced to retreat. The cowboy and the woman had survived the confrontation, not through brute force alone, but through strategy, intelligence, and trust in each other. The woman's confidence had grown immensely, and the cowboy's respect for her courage deepened. As night fell fully, they made a small fire inside the ranch, careful to keep it low and controlled. They ate in silence, each lost in thought. The woman reflected on the day, realizing that she had faced real danger and survived. The cowboy thought about the path ahead, knowing that more challenges awaited, but also knowing that they were stronger together. Finally, they settled down to rest. The woman, exhausted but safe for the moment, allowed herself to relax. She leaned slightly against the cowboy, a silent acknowledgement of trust and reliance. The cowboy remained vigilant, keeping watch through the night, his eyes scanning the darkness for any signs of movement. By dawn, the woman had recovered enough to sit up and eat properly. The cowboy had taught her not just to survive, but to observe, to plan, and to act. She was no longer merely a passenger in her own life. She was a participant, gaining courage and skill with each passing day. The plains stretched endlessly before them, and the cowboy knew the journey was far from over. But for the first time, the woman felt a sense of strength, a sense that she could face the challenges ahead. She had trusted, she had acted, and she had survived. And the cowboy had proven time and again that he would protect her no matter the cost. The journey continued, but the bond between them had solidified. Trust had been earned, courage had been tested, and survival had been achieved. They were ready for whatever came next together, facing the unknown with determination and hope. The early morning sun painted the plains in soft golden hues as the cowboy and the Apache woman set out once more. The air was crisp, filled with the faint scent of wildflowers and the dry grass that stretched endlessly in every direction. They had survived pursuit, confrontation, and exhaustion, yet the cowboy knew that the journey was far from over. Safety was temporary, and the world beyond the plains was full of uncertainty. But this time, there was a new confidence in the woman's step, a quiet strength that had grown from days of trust, guidance, and shared struggle. As they rode, the woman glanced around at the vastness of the plains, taking in the beauty she had once been too fearful to notice. "It's beautiful here," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. The cowboy smiled slightly, his eyes scanning the horizon. "It is," he replied. "But beauty doesn't protect you. You have to stay alert, always aware of what's around you." She nodded, understanding that surviving the land required not only courage but also awareness and wisdom. The sun climbed higher, and they followed hidden trails, keeping to the shadows when possible. The cowboy led them away from well-traveled paths, knowing that their enemies might still be searching. He taught her to read the signs in the earth, the difference between footprints of humans and animals, the subtle disturbances in grass and dirt, the direction of wind that could carry scent to those who were hunting. She learned quickly, absorbing his lessons, eager to become capable, not just reliant. By midday, they reached a small creek, its water clear and cold. The cowboy dismounted first, leading the horse to drink while the woman followed. She cupped the water in her hands, letting it trickle slowly to her lips, savoring each drop. The cowboy watched her quietly, noting the subtle change in her demeanor. She was no longer the terrified, fragile girl he had found days ago. She was stronger, aware, and capable of facing challenges with determination. As they rested, the woman spoke more openly about her dreams and hopes. She spoke of a life where she could walk freely without fear, where she could see the world beyond the mountains and plains that had confined her. The cowboy listened, offering encouragement and reassurance. He did not promise what the future would hold. He knew that uncertainty was inevitable, but he promised that he would remain by her side, protecting her as best as he could and guiding her towards safety and freedom. Hours passed, and the sun began to sink lower in the sky. The cowboy knew they needed a place to rest for the night, somewhere hidden and secure. He guided them to a small grove of trees, sheltered from the main trail, where the horse could graze and they could build a low fire. The woman helped, gathering small sticks and branches, her movements steady and confident. The cowboy watched her, silently acknowledging how far she had come. She was no longer a passive survivor. She was a partner in her own protection, and that gave him hope. As the fire crackled softly, the woman prepared a simple meal over the flames. She handed the cowboy some bread and dried meat, and he nodded his thanks. They ate quietly, the warmth of the fire and the shared meal offering comfort after days of travel and tension. Around them, the plains were quiet, yet the cowboy remained alert, listening for any signs of danger. He knew that while the immediate threat had passed, the world could still be unpredictable and unforgiving. After their meal, they sat by the fire in silence, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. The woman spoke softly, her voice filled with reflection. "I never thought I would see the stars again, not like this," she said. The cowboy nodded, understanding the depth of her words. She had been through darkness, both in body and spirit, and now she was beginning to experience light again, not just in the sky, but in her life. He reached out subtly, resting a hand near hers without touching, a gesture of reassurance. "The stars are always there," he said. "Even when we can't see them, they're still shining. You've survived this far, and you'll survive what comes next, too. You're stronger than you think." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and a quiet determination. For the first time in a long while, she believed him, believed in the possibility of safety, freedom, and even happiness. Night deepened, and they settled into rest. The cowboy kept watch, alert to any signs of movement, any hint of danger. But the woman, now more confident and aware, no longer clung to fear alone. She had learned to rely on her instincts, on her skills, and on the trust they had built together. In the quiet of the night, there was a sense of peace, fragile, yes, but real. By dawn, they were ready to continue their journey. The cowboy had planned a route that would lead them toward safer lands, away from the paths of those who had once pursued her. The woman mounted the horse with a steadier posture, her confidence evident in every movement. They rode in silence at first, letting the morning calm settle around them, each lost in thought about the journey so far and what lay ahead. As the day progressed, the plains gave way to rolling hills and scattered forests. The woman marveled at the changing scenery, allowing herself to feel hope without guilt. "I never imagined I could see so much," she said softly. "It's like a whole new world." The cowboy smiled, keeping his voice steady and calm. "It's a world that's out there waiting for you. You just have to keep moving forward and stay aware." Along the way, they encountered small signs of life, birds singing in the trees, deer grazing in the distance, a rabbit darting across the path. These small glimpses of life reminded the woman of the world beyond fear and captivity. She began to feel a sense of freedom she had thought impossible, a feeling that filled her with both joy and quiet determination. She realized that her survival was not just about escaping danger, but about reclaiming her life. By late afternoon, they reached a small, secluded valley with a clear stream and ample shelter. The cowboy knew this would be a good place to rest, to regain strength before continuing further. They made camp, and the woman helped build a fire and prepare a meal. This time, her movements were confident and deliberate, a reflection of the strength she had gained through her journey. As they ate, the cowboy spoke softly about the future, about the possibilities that lay ahead. "You've survived the worst of it," he said. "Now it's about living, finding a place where you can be safe and strong, where you can rebuild your life. You're no longer a prisoner. You're free to decide what comes next." The woman listened, absorbing his words, feeling the truth in them. For the first time, she truly believed that freedom was possible, and that she had the strength to embrace it. Night fell once more, and the stars shone brightly above them. The woman sat by the fire, reflecting on her journey, on the courage she had found within herself, and on the trust she had placed in the cowboy. She realized that survival was not just about escaping danger, but about learning to live fully again. And in that moment, she felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for her own strength, but for the man who had guided and protected her, who had never wavered in his promise to keep her safe. The cowboy watched her quietly, understanding the depth of her transformation. She had come a long way from the terrified, starving girl he had found in the abandoned cabin. She was strong, aware, and capable, ready to face the world with courage and determination. And he knew that as long as she stayed true to herself, she would continue to thrive, no matter what challenges lay ahead. By morning, they were ready to move again. The journey ahead would still have challenges, but the fear that had once defined her life had begun to fade. She rode with confidence, her eyes bright and alert, ready to face whatever came next. The cowboy guided her carefully, knowing that while danger could appear, the skills, courage, and trust they had built together would see them through. As they rode toward the horizon, the plains stretching endlessly before them, the woman felt a sense of hope and freedom she had never known. She had survived captivity, danger, and fear. She had trusted, learned, and grown. And now, with the cowboy by her side, she felt ready to embrace the life that awaited her. The cowboy glanced at her, a quiet smile on his face. "You're under my protection," he said softly, "but you're no longer just being protected. You're a partner in your own life." Strong, capable, and free. The woman looked at him, her eyes shining with gratitude and determination. She nodded, understanding the full meaning of his words. She was safe, yes, but more importantly, she was no longer powerless. Together, they rode into the sunset, the golden light stretching across the plains, illuminating a path of hope, survival, and new beginnings. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had transformed them both. Trust had been earned, courage had been tested, and freedom had been reclaimed. And as the plains stretched endlessly before them, there was a sense of possibility, a promise that life could be lived fully, with strength, hope, and courage. The story of the Apache woman and the cowboy came to a quiet, powerful close, not with an end to their journey, but with the beginning of a life defined by freedom, trust, and resilience. The plains were vast, the dangers real, but together they had found safety, courage, and the possibility of a brighter future. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all.